Hebrew lesson this morning comes from Psalm 139, 1 through 6, and 3 through 18. Lord, you have examined me. You know me. You know when I sit down and when I stand up. Even from far away, you comprehend my plans. You study my traveling and resting. You are thoroughly familiar with all my ways. This isn't a word on my tongue, Lord, there isn't a word on my tongue, Lord, that you don't already know completely. You surround me, front and back. You put your hand on me. That kind of knowledge is too much for me. It's so high above me that I can't fathom it. You are the one who created my innermost parts. You knit me together while I was still in my mother's womb. I give thanks to you that I was marvelously set apart. Your works are wonderful. I know them very well. My bones weren't hidden from you when I was being put together in a secret place, when I was being woven together in the deep parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my embryo, and on your scroll every day was written that was being formed for me before any one of them had yet happened. God, your plans are incomprehensible to me. Their total number is countless. If I tried to count them, they outnumber grains of sand. If I came to the very end, I'll still be with you. The word of God.
This Sunday is Martin Luther King Sunday. Tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day. Some people are off work because of it. Paying attention and honoring something that happened, how long ago? It was 1968. How long is that? 40 some years? I lost track. 47 years? Yeah. It is just, we hear a lot of things these days. We hear how we can't trust people. We hear the word thugs used. Muslims. Hoodies. Gangsters. We hear a lot of stuff. It seems like in the good old days, in the golden era, back whenever, life was good. See that slide with that poem. It's a poem written by a guy named Sam Foss in sometime at the turn of the century. He writes, "Let me live in my house by the side of the road where the race of men go by. They are good, they are bad, they are weak, they are strong, wise, foolish. So am I." Then why should I sit in the scorner's seat or hurl the cynic's ban? Let me live in my house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. Now that does sound like the good old days. I remember when I suppose I was 6 or 7. My dad and his friend were visiting in the backyard. I said, "Dad, tell me about the good old days, back in the 1890s. And they laughed at me. The good old days, way back when? Back when I was a child. Back when you were a child. Always golden memories. Can't remember that life was tough then, too, for your mom and your dad and your grandparents. So we are surprised when we look out at the world and we see a harsh, angry, maybe even evil place, and we come up with a poem like this. That poem I lifted up from the Tuesday night Bible study, and this poem is by Max Anders, the writer of that study, and it's kind of an echo of it, a dark echo. "Let me live in my house on the cul-de-sac, where no one ever drives by. Men are bad, they are weak, they will lie and will steal. Be a victim? No, not I. Let them ply their wicked trade of life on less suspecting souls. Let me live in my house on the cul-de-sac, where trouble never tolls." That's the story we're being told, day in and day out. We're told of it out here, the corner of no one where we live out here because there aren't a lot of troubles. It's kind of a long cul-de-sac. But we're being told that in the city too. The television is busy telling you, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Be afraid of hoodies, be afraid of gangsters, be afraid of Muslims, and be afraid of thugs. And we got to the place now I'm almost afraid to talk about what happened in 1968, 1960 and 1968, because that was such a great movement to understanding and figuring out that a big portion of our country is made up by human beings just like you and me. They are not subhuman. They are not naturally stupid. And they should not be forced to drink out of their own water fountain or use their own toilets or sit at the back of the bus. The entire oppression based on just common little things that white people did and black people had to do. It rose up. The marking point is when Rosa Parks decided that she was too tired to stand up in the bus, let a white man have her seat. She got pulled off the bus, thrown in jail, and that became the Montgomery boycott. Unfortunately, we had somebody by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King to be in the lead of that because he believed in something that very few others have ever tried. He believed in nonviolence. Strategical nonviolence, tactical nonviolence. This was not, just wimpy nonviolence. This was standing in their face and refusing to throw even the second blow. That kind of nonviolence. And so when we saw the policemen on horseback swinging their billy clubs and hitting people just beyond the Purdy Bridge, we could see where the violence really was. Many years later, Martin Luther King shared that he was happy that he had not sneezed. Here's his part of his speech.
Several years ago I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was looking down writing, and I said, "Yes." The next minute, I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. That blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. And once that's punctured, you're drowned in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. It came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter, and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." She said, "While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. And I'm simply writing you to say that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze." And I want to say tonight, that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960 when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962. The Negroes in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963. The black people of Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze.
I'm so happy I didn't sneeze. I'm so happy to have been through all of that struggle. We seem to think that we shouldn't have struggle. We should live in the cul-de-sac or the gated community where nothing goes by, where everybody out there off the cul-de-sac on the road is evil and bad and dangerous, and I'm not going to be hoodwinked by them. Now that is completely false. The first poem made it better, said it better. Good and bad, right, wrong, wise, foolish, and so am I. The world is full of different kinds of people, and I'm one of them. And I don't want to be a person who beats on other people, no matter what. The song we sang, our first song, is called The Black National Anthem. I just read a thing by Shelby Spong. He said when he was in youth group, they went to a black church to have a shared youth group. He lived in the South, lived in North Carolina. And they all stood up to sing the national anthem, and he was all heading out with, oh, say, and everybody else said, let every voice and sing. He's going, what? Black national anthem. You listened to the words as you said these? Did you mouth the words, internalize the words? Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, fell in the days when hope unborn had died. This is a story of a struggling and yet hopeful people who have come through so much and yet today are being blended and blanded and battered down by a bunch of hate mongers who use terms like thugs, gangsters, those people. Right there on television. You know, when Barack Obama was elected, there were a lot of people saying it's the end of racism. It was the end of racism as we knew it. We went to a whole new level of racism in this country. And it's now starting to show itself again. Little pockets of people who do not understand that we are created by God. Black, white, in between. Each and every one of us is surrounded by God. Martin Luther King knew that God is in front of him, God is behind him, and God has his arm, his hand on his shoulder. And to the best of his ability, he followed God. He followed God and didn't worry about it. Because he knew God would take care of all the other details. Let's run that clip.
It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. And then I got into Memphis. And some began to say the threats, or talk about the threats that were out. Or what would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
God keeps calling us into a new world, a new relationship. Almost always it has to do with ending oppression, demanding justice, showing mercy and love. God almost never calls us into defending our position or hiding our failures or hurting others. Because God keeps drawing us forward into the world where the day is coming when black and white and all those other shades won't matter. It won't matter. Because it'll be love that draws us forward. And so far, I'm glad I haven't sneezed. We're seeing what God is doing continually and yet again. As you hear the grinding noises of the new racism in progress, remember how far it had to go and how far we have left for it to go. God calls us forth.